Welcome, everybody, to another American Spaces on Air. This is an initiative brought to you by Instituto Chileno Norteamericano in Santiago and the American Academy of Technology at Universidad de Talca with the support of the American Spaces Network and, of course, the Embassy of the United States in Chile. And, of course, additionally, this is a collaboration with Fulbright Chile. Today we have a very, very special guest. His name is Stephen Good, and he is an associate professor at the Department of Biological and Ecological Engineering at Oregon State University. He received his PhD in environmental engineering from Princeton University in 2013, and he joined the Oregon State University in 2015. Where he has taught graduate and undergraduate courses in hydrology, biosystem modeling, and irrigation. Dr. Good, welcome to American Spaces on Air. It's very nice to have you here.
Happy to be here. Glad to chat.
Awesome. What I just mentioned there was just like a brief description of your very long resume. Is there anything else you would like to talk about regarding your experience?
I don't know. I guess an interesting thing, I originally started out as an undergraduate in mechanical engineering, very far from water and water-related things, and I've been pulled more and more towards water and towards things that are alive that interact with water, and so that reflects kind of a very different kind of set of backgrounds and kind of coming through a lot of different kinds of fields on the way to where I am, which has been really fun.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about how long have you been here in Chile? How long are you going to be here?
Yeah, I got here in August of 2022, and I'm going to be here till I think June of 2023, so about 9 or 10 months. And I'm in Concepcion, Chile, and I've been working at the University of Concepcion, both in Concepcion and in Xi'an, with collaborators there as well. And it's been a wonderful experience so far, and I've been really enjoying it and learning a lot.
Awesome. Those are beautiful places. And what can you tell us about your role as a Fulbrighter or as a Fulbright alumni?
Well, I guess I don't know if I'm technically a Fulbright alumni yet, but the Fulbright program has been really wonderful from my experience. It's allowed me to connect with a lot of people at a lot of different universities and beyond the university kind of sphere of thinking and working with non-governmental organizations and other folks. So it's been really fun being able to connect through the different networks in different ways at things, embassy events, and other ways. So it's the Fulbright program's been really fun and rewarding in that sense.
Absolutely. Very good. So why did you choose Chile to come to do your Fulbright scholarship?
Yeah, so I'm from the Pacific Northwest of the United States. I don't know if you're familiar with that area or not, but the Pacific Northwest of the United States, specifically I live in Oregon, but that region shares a lot with this region in central and southern Chile. We have a volcanic mountain range that spans the region, kind of running north to south, that's active, right? And we have a coastal mountain range, and in between the two, we have a lush valley full of important agricultural crops that are changing and facing lots of interesting water resource problems. And I study and work on water resource related issues. And so this is an opportunity to come to a region that is facing similar problems and, not being it has a different culture, different perspective on things, different kind of systems in place. And see what I could learn, how we could connect things and potentially work towards solving these problems in both places in a more efficient way. So there's a lot of connections between our regions, which has been really fun.
Perfect. And is this your first time here in Chile? Like, are you seeing those connections for the first time or you chose Chile because you know how similar they were.
Yeah, so I chose Chile, and I've been trying to build connections here because of the similarities in the climate and the ecosystems and how water is managed, and the differences too, to kind of learn and focus on that. Many years ago, after I finished my PhD, my partner and I took a backpacking trip in southern Chile through Torres del Paine for, I don't know, 10 days or something like that. But that was many years ago, and not really at all connected to anything. We were just having fun.
Absolutely.
So
What
I
did
can't
you
see
think of?
this.
What did you think of Chile back then?
I thought it was great. We had a lot of fun. It's beautiful. I mean, Chile's a spectacular country. It's beautiful. There's great food and great people that you meet, and it was a blast. We had a wonderful time back then. Yeah, it was great, and it's really funny. I during that trip, because I'm a scientist and I love science and data, I ended up bringing a bunch of tiny little vials where I collected water while I was backpacking through Torres del Paine, and I got little water samples and sent them off to a lab, where I was working, and they got analyzed and they got put in a database somewhere. And this is 2013. Does that sound right? And just a month ago, somebody contacted me about those water samples because they found them in a big database, and I happen to be back in Chile at the same time. So it's just the world's colliding. It's really fun.
Another reason to go back to Torres del Paine, maybe?
I'm gonna have to go. Resurvey my sites.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay, so regarding this project, so could you explain it a little bit further in general terms? So you are here in Chile and you are studying similarities and some differences.
Yeah. So I'm specifically focusing on what happens when water falls on ecosystems and where it ends up going, right? So water comes out from the sky, and it goes in a couple distinct places, right? So water runs out in rivers and streams back to the oceans, and that's fairly easy to measure. We've been measuring flows in rivers and streams for a long time. Water also goes from the surface of the earth back up to the atmosphere, right? And when it does that, it can take a couple of different pathways, right? It can evaporate off of soils. It can get caught on a leaf as a droplet and then evaporate back up to the atmosphere. But the main way in which water moves from the surface of the earth back to the atmosphere, of the terrestrial surface, I should say, not kind of the oceans, is through plants, right? And so a lot of the things that I work on is kind of understanding the fate of water when it enters an ecosystem in a watershed, where it's going to go and what are the reasons that cause it to go through these different pathways, both in natural systems, forested catchments, desert systems, all those kind of things, but also importantly in agricultural systems, right? When we have a field that we're irrigating and trying to grow crops, oftentimes we want the water that we're putting on to go through the plant. If it doesn't go through the plant, it's kind of wasted. There are subtle differences in why that's not always the case, but oftentimes we want to be as efficient as possible with our water, and so we want the water that we apply to irrigate agriculture to go through the plants. And so a lot of my work focuses on understanding these pathways and how they change through time, through practices, and also how they're changing in response to climate change. And so I'm here in Chile looking at kind of a similar eco-climatological regions. They're kind of analogous. There's this formal concept of climate analogies. Kind of extending this to hydrologic analogies is part of the motivation for being here. And so understanding kind of similarities and differences in the pathways water is taking, and how we can understand what drives those differences, and also then kind of have better forecasts of what future conditions are going to be, and also hydrologic predictions in the current environment, right? So if you know the route that water is taking through systems, you can better make an estimate of droughts and floods and all the things that folks get really worried about, which are really important.
Absolutely. Do you think maybe improving irrigation systems could also improve the conditions of those climate situations in which there are droughts and things like that?
To some degrees, there's a lot of interesting effects when you talk about increasing agricultural systems. And oftentimes what actually ends up happening is when you improve the irrigation efficiency and the water that you're applying to a system is more targeted, more water is ending up at the roots and going in it, you end up having less water sometimes percolating down into soils, and you end up growing more food, which, you know, we as people like to eat food. I love food. I eat food every day. And so increases in the productivity and efficiency of irrigation often leads to increases in productivity in food produced, but not necessarily in, let's say, water saved. Oftentimes, more food is grown with the same amount of water instead of the same amount of food grown with less water. That makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, completely. Very good.
So there's little differences there, and then how changing climates, warming temperatures, different levels of humidity in the air also influence those things. Is ongoing work that is important.
Perfect. On a related matter, so last Saturday was December 10th, which is the Human Rights Day. So could you say, or could you express what can you say about water accessibility as a human right?
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. Water is so important to survive, to live, both for ourselves as humans, but also is for ecosystems, right? When we think about water provisioning and water availability, it's having access to clean and safe and healthy water is so important. And it's something we can't live without, and is increasingly increasingly challenging right now with so many competing kind of groups and organizations making withdrawals and looking to leverage water in all sorts of different ways, and also there's a lot of water wrapped up in all sorts of different trade activities, moving water around. If you think about the amount of water that's inherent in a tomato, right, as an example, or strawberries, there's a lot of water that's mixed in with all sorts of different aspects of society, from energy production, right? So much of energy production is dependent on water, to food production, and to also just, having safe, clean drinking water for everybody. So it's wrapped up in a lot of different important human rights that we really need to be able to think about and be careful as we move forward.
Absolutely, which makes it more important to understand where the water goes and how it flows through ecosystems, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, they're all these things are connected to each other, and as fields, as disciplines, if you think about agronomy or hydrology or hydroelectric power generation or geologics, hydrogeology, all these different fields are now becoming more and more interconnected academically, reflecting our improved understanding of the interconnections that these systems all have, and that allows us to make more kind of broad scale or more broadly encompassing kind of inferences and understandings of how things are going. So these connections are really important when you think about these different aspects of how water touches everybody's lives.
Absolutely. So you are currently working with Centro IULA and the Environmental Science Faculty of Universidad de Concepción.
Mm-hmm.
How have you experienced the differences and similarities, not just of our climate that can be similar, but also in a cultural way?
The group of folks that I've been working with and chatting with have also had the opportunity of participating in some meetings throughout the country, and it's been really positive. I've met a lot of people doing really great work and addressing really important questions in really exciting ways. And so in that sense, academically, kind of in the setting in which I am sitting in, has been a really wonderful experience. I'm having a lot of fun doing that, and kind of it's really cool being here and talking with somebody and saying, oh, this person works on this. I know somebody working on sort of a similar problem on the other hemisphere, in the northern hemisphere, and I'm thinking about trying to ways to connect folks more, and hopefully that can lead to longer term partnerships in water resources. And so it's been a blast. Everybody I've met has been really spectacular. It's been really fun. I've also had really cool interactions with students, which has been really cool. I love working with students, and part of the downside of being on sabbatical in Chile is that I'm not near the students that I have in my group that are in the United States, and we're meeting, of course, and chatting, but it's fun meeting new students here, and so that's been really cool.
Absolutely. And besides the climate similarities and all of that, when it comes to culture, do you think that there are also similarities there?
Oh, I think are you there? I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. Sorry. Go ahead.
No problem. I was asking that besides the similarities in climate, are there cultural similarities as well that you can point out?
Oh, sure. We're all people, right? People are people. Everybody's got their quirks and funny things, and academics are particularly quirky in some ways, but there's a ton of similarities, and it's been really fun. So I'm here with my family, and we have our kids in school, and meeting people through the schools and other social kind of organizations, and there's many similarities. I don't necessarily want to pick on one or two of them here or there, but yeah, I feel very comfortable and happy and at home here, and it hasn't been a really drastic adjustment, I guess, in our heads. The most difficult thing so far has been I think our eating schedule is still tweaked a little earlier than the average Chilean schedule, which is fine because we never have to wait at a restaurant. And that's maybe the biggest thing right now. But
not having to wait at a restaurant, yeah. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it's great. I like looking at the positive side of things. So.
Absolutely. Perfect. So speaking of people, and what is the importance of having citizens being aware around climate change, especially when some generations maybe they could feel like they are not the ones that are going to make the changes, right? Like older generation thinking that it's the job of the new generation.
Yeah, knowledge of climate change is really important, and when I say, there's obviously really important research that needs to happen in terms of how we understand the climate and its adjustments and changes through time, but a lot of the broad kind of understanding of climate change is not exactly novel anymore. It's decades old science that's been kind of fairly well established by hundreds and hundreds of papers and a large consensus of people, and so a lot of the issues right now, I think, have to do with communicating that understanding with folks and kind of make sure that people understand the importance of addressing climate change and all the different ways it's going to be manifest. There's going to be, and there already are, changes in the climate and changes in the associated hydrology and that are going to happen and are going to continue to get worse. And there's a lot of things we can do to kind of adapt and mitigate some of these changes, but it's going to take a consensus of people working together to make that happen. And it's important that we get folks on board for that, and get folks to come into agreement and participate in working towards solutions and enacting them at broad kind of scales.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, of creating awareness and all of that, what do you think are some things that we could do as people, as regular people who are maybe not that much invested in this subject to help the climate change?
Yeah, one of the most important things we can do is it's hard. I mean, there's little things you can do and there's big things you can do, and making sure that our leaders are aware that climate change, that we as a group of citizens are invested and concerned with the trajectories that we're on, and they know as leaders that the people they're representing want to see changes affected in terms of how structures and organizations and governments are working is really important. So that's kind of a very top-down level thing, and there's also kind of other examples of kind of how we're living our lives day to day that are also important, but likely not going to be as impactful as some of those larger scale kind of making our voices heard in a kind of a public sector kind of way, but are still important and set a good example, and also through education and teaching and there's still a lot of opportunity for innovation and new technologies to kind of help with some of the issues that are going to be coming and are already coming online, new solar power, other renewable energies, other ways in which we think about crops and its connection with water. So there's still opportunities in terms of technological innovation, in terms of governmental regulations, and in terms of kind of personal action. There's lots of things we can be doing that we maybe could be doing better.
Absolutely. I think education and just trying to be informed about the things that are happening are two very important things that we could do just to help solve this situation. Very good. So you were making research about future water availability both in Oregon and in the central zone of Chile. What are the main challenges that future generations may have on this matter?
Yeah, so a couple things are happening, right? So the obvious thing, that a simple way in which some folks like to talk about the effects of climate change on the hydrologic cycle is this thing called the wet gets wetter, dry gets drier paradigm, where as air is warmer, air can hold more moisture, right? So warm air can hold more water in it. And so that means that the warm places are going to get more water brought to them, and the dry places are going to get more water drawn away from them. So the wet regions are going to get wetter, the dry regions are going to get drier. It's just kind of this acceleration of the hydrologic cycle, as some folks say. And so that means that we're going to see shifts in kind of intensity of rainfalls. We're going to see more intense events, perhaps less total water. But even if we have the same amount of total water, if we have more intense rain events happening, the same amount of water arriving in more intense yet less frequent storms, that shifts how water can enter the soils, how it can be uptaken by roots, and move through plants. And so all these things are going to make water use by natural systems still a bit more challenging as kind of this intensification of the cycle. And so one of the things that we've been thinking about is kind of, if you think about all of the water that lands in a place, and you think about some of that gets used by plants, this kind of the biological fraction of water that's used. In both wet and dry places, we're expected to see that amount go down. In terms of ecosystems are just going to be less well adapted to these new kind of hydrologic regimes, and so they're going to be less able to take advantage of kind of more quickly moving water systems. It's harder to grab a speeding ball, faster moving objects or something like that. Some analogy with sports.
Very good.
Yeah.
Perfect. Very good. And tell me something, Stephen. Do you speak Spanish?
I do. I
Sure.
speak a bit of Spanish. Many years ago, I lived in the Dominican Republic for a couple years, and I learned some Spanish there. It's Caribbean Spanish and not Chilean Spanish, so it's a bit different. Um, but I've been having a lot of fun learning my Chilenismos and getting my ears fast enough to listen to the Chileans speak in their way. So it's been pretty pleasant. It's been fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Um, yeah. Caribbean Spanish is very different from Spanish in Chile.
It is. It
Uh,
is. It's got a little bit of sing song to it and different S's and lack thereof.
but it's also very fun to get to know, like different words, the meaning of different words all across Latin America. That's something very fun to discover.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of fun and yeah, and also there's like how you think about time and the Caribbean the Caribbean culture is just it's very distinct and different than here, and so it's also really fun seeing these cultural differences.
Absolutely. We all fall under the same umbrella of Latin America, but there are some clear differences in many different aspects. And
Yeah,
I think that's something very rich.
yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's really exciting.
Very good. Okay, Stephen, I have one final question to you, and that would be, what would be some advice for our audience on this subject of water preservation?
Yeah, I that's that's a good question. Water is not. I was just out with my kids this morning, and we saw a little sign somewhere that said water isn't free. There's a lot of energy wrapped up in the water that we use, and also there's a lot of water wrapped up in the food that we eat. And so water kind of touches all these really important aspects of our life: food, energy, and water. And so we want to be careful with all the resources we have, and they're all take time and effort to produce. And so we just want to make sure that we're not wasteful with what we're doing with any of those things. Um,
Especially
yeah,
water,
yeah,
since, as you
yeah.
say, it's involved in pretty much everything we do, and it is so easy to waste it.
Yep. I mean, wasting food is wasting water, right? So,
Yeah,
so it's not just necessarily making sure you turn off the tap, but also making sure you
turn off the
don't let a
lights.
bunch of you got it. You can save water in many different ways, and not all of them directly revolve around liquid water in a cup in your house.
Absolutely. Perfect, Stephen. Thank you so much for being here with us today in American Spaces on Air. This was a very informative conversation, and yeah, the American Spaces Network is very wide all across Chile. So there's an American space in Concepcion, as a matter of fact.
Wonderful.
Um, so yeah, this is your second house now. We
Oh,
are very happy to have you here. So anytime you want, we can have another conversation.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Well,